Hey, this is Reese Scruggs from Havoc.
This is Alex from Lisa Eyes.
Hi, this is Dan from Valfreya.
This is Tyler from Begat the Nephilim.
This is Samuel from Animal, and you're listening to the Great Metal Debate Podcast.
Podcast listeners, welcome back to the show for another metal artist interview. I'm joined by River and Dave from Louisville metal clan Volcandra. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the Great Metal Debate.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
First, for folks who aren't familiar with this band, tell us a little bit about how the project came together.
Well, River and the other three guys were in a band called Dave Scufa, and that band eventually broke up, and so they wanted to keep the ball rolling. They got Jamie, our other guitar player, on board, and then they asked me to do vocals, and pretty much the rest is history.
I noticed that there's an old Dave Scufa track called Volcandra. Is that the origin of the name?
Yeah, and that track was actually written by our bass player Dyer prior to Dip Scufa being a band. So then they ended up bringing that song into that band, and then took it just to kind of connect it to what we were doing previously.
So is this band kind of an outgrowth musically of Deep Scufa, or do you see it as a more of a break musically and trying to move into something new?
Moving into something new, I'd say. Like, the songs are definitely more, a little bit less black metal, a little bit more influences in there. And we don't want to sound like that band exactly. We want to try to bring in, Jamie and Dave's input as well, make it all of our ideas rather than just doing the same thing we were doing. And I think we're all happier with what we've been doing now than we were in the past as well.
Now, there are a couple of songs that were Dave Scufa tracks that we are playing live currently, but like River said, other input has been put in by myself lyrically and Jamie, as far as like a guitar standpoint goes. So to some extent you could say that those songs have been revamped and they kind of have a new life for this project.
River, you mentioned black metal, and the genre question is one that often gets asked, and we debated on our podcast. From your perspective as an artist, what's the role of labeling a band or a certain album or even song into a specific genre? Is that helpful, or does that, as a musician, do you find it to be not that helpful to you?
I think that it's something that can be useful, like in conversation, if somebody's interested in one, subgenre, being able to know what each other are talking about when you're talking about bands or what music you've been listening to. But as far as writing music, like, to call it black metal is kind of just the superficial things that, have been constant through it, like blast beats, high-pitched screaming, as opposed to like death metal, or, tremolo pick guitars and all that. But to say that, us, I'd say, or plenty of other modern bands are like black metal in the sense that it was, in the years past, especially when it was first starting, it's like, it's a large disconnect between like what we're doing or what a lot of other modern bands are doing, and then like something like the second wave of black metal or something like that,
Man, I've long argued that black metal is the most generous genre as far as different influences and sounds. Like, you can be a black metal band and almost sound like anything. There are no limits to that specific subgenre. You guys have thoughts about that?
I think the same is applicable to death metal, but I do agree that black metal is a really versatile subgenre of metal. And like River was saying, we're not black metal in the sense that we're, conducting rituals, or we have, stage names like Necro Butcher, and that, we're not like worshiping Satan or anything like
No
that.
corpse paint tonight?
No corpse paint. We're gonna do something a little different for tonight's Halloween show. But anyway, yeah, I think the term black metal, as far as like, a modern way to reference that, is kind of more of the sound of the music. And when you say that, it's like, you can open up so many other doors with just saying black metal, because it doesn't have to just be one specific type.
Now, you referenced the show tonight, and you guys are on the bill with some pretty incredible bands with a variety of styles. You have Stagecoach Inferno, which has more of the classic power metal sound. The guys and ladies in Winterham bringing the pagan folk metal attack. What's the difference for you all playing as part of a lineup that has a variety of sounds versus one where the bands are in that same vein? Do you have a preference for one or the other?
We haven't actually had many opportunities to play with a whole lineup of bands that sound super similar to us, and I feel like it definitely makes it more interesting to be able to, have a power metal band, a death metal band, a doom band, black metal band, whatever, because, I think that there's a lot of crossover in the fan bases, and I know I personally enjoy lots of different subgenres of metal, so I enjoy that versus 4 black metal bands, even though I enjoy that too. It's nice to have that diversity,
Yeah, I think shows that showcase a lot of like variety with different bands on the bill are really good for the turnout. You have a lot of people that may come to see band A, and then they see band C, and you make a new fan that way. They didn't even expect to come there and watch your set. And something that's been really nice as far as like feedback with Volcandra is that a lot of people have mentioned to us that they don't typically listen to black metal, but they like what we're doing. So I guess you could say it's safe to say that we can fit on a bill with bands of other subgenres.
Sounds like there have been some surprises, but pleasant surprises when they hear you. So if you guys don't mind, tell us a little bit about your own personal musical backgrounds. Did you all grow up in musical homes, and do either of you have any formal training?
My parents were both, well, they're still both extremely obsessed with music. My dad had a huge record collection growing up, like hundreds of records, so I flipped through and found things I liked, and then, eventually that led to metal and other things. And from there, my dad also played guitar, so I pretty much started playing guitar because of him, and I've taken some formal lessons, but it was very early in my playing, so it's hard to say how much of that is carried over, because when I was like 10 years old, but I've been playing for what would it be, like 13 years, I guess now. I should be better after playing for 13 years, but yeah, I've just always loved music. Mostly because of my family. They've pretty much required that you're into music or you're just going to have a bad time.
I myself, I did not grow up in a musical home, but I have an aunt and uncle who kind of introduced me to like classic rock bands like Led Zeppelin or AC/DC. I think AC/DC was the first band I really got into because of them. And then, in like middle school, I had friends that were really into like thrash metal or bands like Black Sabbath and Motorhead. And then I got into like Slayer, Metallica, and Testament. And then eventually it's like a snowball effect. You get into bands that are more extreme, as the years go by. And I picked up guitar when I was like 14, so I've been playing for over 10 years. I'm not going to do the math right now, but no, I mean, I definitely found it on my own, so to speak. But more so than that, I have some of my family and my friends, from middle school and high school to thank for that.
Now, I understand Volcandra is working on their debut album, but you guys have already released a single, Plains of Despair, back in January. Tell us about that song and why that was the one you came out with at the beginning to introduce the band.
That song we actually wrote in between finding these guys, Jamie and Dave, and adding them into the mix. And when we were Deb Scoofa, we wrote that song, and we figured, oh, let's record it, find people that are going to be interested in doing this with us. And we found those two dudes, so they added their stuff to it. And then we released it pretty much like a few weeks after they joined the band, which was interesting, but we were just ready to get the ball rolling. And I don't know, I think it actually turned out to be a pretty good single, because it's kind of one of our more straightforward, just, you know, vibe, good vibe tracks that just has a little bit of everything we do on the rest of our songs, I'd say, but also I wouldn't say it's our best song, but it's just fun to play still. I enjoy that song.
Yeah, for me, I think, and I find it funny that a song called Plains of Despair is our feel-good song. But no, it's that song's like, I feel like it's the tip of the iceberg as far as like to what the rest of the songs sound like, and it just gives you a taste of kind of what we're doing and kind of like the ballpark of subgenres that we're playing with. Yeah, it was fun to get that track, and then to have a lot of open space to write a lot of lyrics over. So, and that's a completely different approach for me, as opposed to Cryptic Hymn, which is the death metal band I play in, where there's a lot of like notey riffage, and then there will be passages in the songs that are like, a minute long where there are no vocals. But in this case, there's a lot more for me to do as far as the vocalist, which is fine because I'm not playing an instrument. So it was a fun, slightly different approach.
Definitely something to whet the appetite for the upcoming album. Now, guys, our podcast is centered in Western Kentucky, so we're blessed. We get to meet a lot of bands here in Louisville as well as in the Nashville market, both of which, though, are off the kind of the main tour circuit along the coasts and through the South and the upper Midwest. What do you guys think of, first, the metal scene in this city, Louisville, Kentucky, and also how challenging do you think it is for individual bands as well as scenes to develop when you're a little bit out of those main tour tracks?
Well, first off, I think it's safe to say that the Louisville music scene is really healthy. For example, last night, River and a couple of our other buddies, got an ensemble of guys together to play Mastodon's Leviathan album from front to back, and that, in itself is kind of a testament to how good things are. And there's such a wide variety of different heavy bands from this area. It's not just death metal or black metal or hardcore. It's like literally like you could think of a subgenre, and there's probably a handful of bands that play each one. But as far as the other question goes, how difficult do I think it is to create a fan base outside of this? I think it depends on the city. Certain cities, it's like hit or miss. Like, you got to play there a couple of times before you really get a following. But other times, it's like, people in certain places just kind of religiously go to shows. And again, it all just depends on who's promoting it and the bands on the bill and how well known they are. It's a multitude of things. But you gotta build your regional support, and then slowly just branch your way out from there. You can't just go all the way across the country and expect to do well because you're in the West Coast or whatever. You gotta play it safe. You gotta be realistic about it.
I was just gonna say, I think that the most important thing is just making those connections with other bands in your home city too. Like, when you have bands that come through and play like places like here at Mag Bar or Tap Room, and you play a show with them and you get to know them, and they're a few cities away, you let them crash at your house, or you put together the show, Like, that's the best way to get outside of your city and expect to find success, because then they'll have a show in their town where they're playing with you and their fans show up there, So I think a lot of bands do help each other out, and that does make it easier to get out of town and do well.
Yeah, it's a community effort, and that's how you create those friendships and those bonds is, when an out-of-town band comes through, you take care of them, make sure that they're treated right and paid well, and, hopefully down the line they'll do the same thing for you, or at least point you in the right direction.
Well, speaking about those opportunities, I understand you guys have some big shows coming up, opening for a couple of national touring bands. Want to talk about those shows?
Yeah. So, next up we're playing with our buddies in Paladin on November 6th at Magbar. And I've known those guys for a hot minute. One of my older bands played down in Atlanta, and a couple of members in Paladin were in another band at the time. And we created that friendship ever since then, and we had them come through a few months ago. They played in Louisville, and we took really good care of them and got them paid really well. And those guys are going to blow up real soon. I can definitely see that happening. They're incredible. And then we have we're playing with Uwada, as I think that's how you pronounce it. Playing with them at Zanzibar here in Louisville, November 19th. Also with our friends in Oubliette and Majutsu. Oubliette from Nashville, Tennessee, by the way. So that's going to be a really exciting show to be a part of. And like we were mentioning earlier, that this is a show where it is all black metal bands from front to back. So
they're really good.
Yeah, they're all really good bands. So
For the black metal fans, that's one you don't want to miss. Well, guys, starting to wrap up with you. Beyond the next few shows, what are the band's plans for 2020, and when can fans expect to hear the debut album from Volcandra?
We don't have an exact date yet. I think that we will before the end of the year, I hope, or early into the beginning of 2020. It's looking like it'll probably be spring of 2020, because we just don't want to be trying to push our material all winter. We'd rather wait till the spring and be able to do it properly. And I think the plan is to just release the album and try and push it out of town as much as possible, like do some, do some short runs, some weekends, maybe a couple longer ones next summer, do as much as we feasibly can to let people hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think once the record's out and it's ready to go, you can definitely expect to see us, making our way around the country a lot more. We're really excited about it. We have a really good feeling about this record. I think we're really confident in it doing well and it being received well. And yeah, like River said, we're going to get out and tour. And we're going to get out as much as we possibly can, get the word out.
Finally, what is the best way for fans to purchase music and merchandise from Volcandra?
As of right now, as it was mentioned before, we just have our first single out right now, Plains of Despair. You can find that on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, all of your streaming services. You can also listen to it on our Bandcamp and download it from there. And then once the album is released, we'll have a proper merchandise store set up. Maybe keep an eye out for like a big cartel link or something like that. And we'll have everything available.
And also come out to see one of these upcoming shows, because I saw the merch booth you had set up downstairs, and you had lots of good things, patches and all sorts of sick merch, the Volcandra logo. Who did that? That's an awesome looking logo.
Christoph Spatchel, is that how you say his last name? He's the Lord of Logos. He's done work for Emperor and so many other legendary bands. He's done work for like Inferi. You just go through his catalog. Yeah, just loads of band. Yeah, Christoph.
Well, guys, my first time to see you all perform live is this evening. I'm looking forward to it, and looking forward to that debut album whenever it comes out. River, Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
I appreciate you having us.